Love espresso, drip coffee, and cold brew? With the Ninja Luxe Cafe, if you can crave it, you can brew it. Espresso, balanced. Drip coffee, rich. Cold brew, in a flash. With Barista Assist technology, you brew with no stress and no guesswork. And make perfect silky microfoam hands-free from dairy or plant-based milks. Bring the coffeehouse home and unlock your favorites with the Ninja Luxe Cafe.
Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
What a save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle!
The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
This feels fucking awesome.
And Portland can't say shit!
Nice work on your little yacht thing.
Villa Vega! Oocha Magooch! All creatures great and small! Villa Vega!
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take come seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart podcast network. I am Jeremiah O'Shan, and I should say thank you to our sponsors, Hacks and Ferments, Full Pull Wines, and of course our subscribers. I am Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me today is my co-host Aaron Campo and our producer Lickett. Sounders are coming off a resounding win against Sporting Kansas City in which they rotated their lineup heavily. They are looking forward to a match against LA Galaxy that's essentially a CONCACAF Champions Cup qualifying spot. The winner will go to the final. The loser will go to the third place game, which gives them one more shot at the getting into the CONCACAF Champions Cup. I will be talking to Maurice Edu of Apple TV later in the show. All that out of the way. Aaron, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's a little hot.
It's a little hot
for my taste, but I shouldn't complain because once the sunshine and longer days are gone, I'm going to be in a much worse space. So, I'll take this over that.
And this is, I guess, technically this is smoke season, and I don't want to say anything about it, but
yeah,
I guess I'll count my blessings. I'll just say it that way.
We've been lucky so far, and really for the last few years, the last really disruptive smoke event, I feel like we in the Seattle Metro have had was really 2020. I think we got
that was like the COVID year where it was you were stuck inside on top of everything else.
When I'm pretty sure my wife was extremely close to having me committed because I was just walking laps around our 800 square foot house and for like 3 hours because I couldn't go on my walks. So
I was walking my dog with like a heavy mask on. I remember that.
And so it was maybe the most dystopian and afraid for the future I'd ever felt at that point.
Yes.
And it's good to always reach new heights, but anyway.
Right. Yeah. So up until now, great opening, by the way. Really get the energy up. Good job, everyone. Thank you for planning that out. That was good. Now let's get to the fun stuff. May as well start with this. The Sounders beat Sporting Kansas City 5-2, which on its face, not that big of a deal. Sporting Kansas City is very bad. They are trending towards one of the historically bad XG seasons They just love giving up chances, and the Sounders created a bunch of them in this game. And they made it interesting. You know, the Sounders jumped out 1-0 lead, gave up the lead, tied it. Then they scored right before halftime, added another goal. Looked like maybe they would cruise. Nope, not going to go that way. Sporting Kansas City pulls one back, but then it was gravy the rest of the way. Fun game, all things considered. Really rotated lineup, and I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from this thing is the Sounders made 8 changes from midweek. That included Cody Baker getting his first start of the season, Snyder Brunell getting his first start of the season. There was just a lot. Danny Leyva got his first start at the 10. They were able to get Christian Roldan at halftime or off at halftime. They got they got Yamar off at halftime. Really not a lot to complain about in this one. I think it really, you know, it was funny because this was the first game after the close of the transfer window. And before the game, we talked to Craig Weibel. We'll talk a bit about our takeaways from that. But it did sort of vindicate their decision to not make like a panic buy. Like, I think everyone agrees that they should have spent some money, and there's some symbolism in that. But from a purely practical perspective, this game was actually pretty illustrative of why they didn't feel like they just needed to add someone for the sake of adding someone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the hallmarks of this run the Sounders has been on is that they haven't had games where they had quite this much rotation, although I guess against Tijuana, they were pretty close to this level.
Yeah. I mean, this was a lot of rotation.
It was.
The fact that Cody Baker started by itself was
tells you a lot.
Yeah.
But they were consistently looked dangerous, looked competent, looked good against whoever they were playing. And then they had the game against Minnesota, and then they had the game against Pueblo where they kind of struggled. They didn't kind of struggle. They struggled mightily to score and didn't score in regulation. And it kind of was starting to feel like maybe that was an aberration. And so I think to not only get back to playing at that level and looking really goal dangerous and looking really purposeful going forward, but to do it with such a heavily rotated team, because that was one of the things that was so impressive about that run is they were doing it with all different kinds of lineups. It was just so clearly a team identity thing. And they got back to that with guys that we haven't seen in quite some time. And, you know, Sporting Kansas City is a bad team. I think by a lot of metrics, the worst team in the league. And you expect to beat them. You should expect to beat them. You should expect to beat them comfortably, I think. But the last time they played Sporting Kansas City here, they didn't beat them comfortably. That was, you know, kind of a nail biter, if I recall correctly. And this just felt much more businesslike, much more competent, and it's good to get back to that. It felt good to have a game like that again, and even though I am very much on the side of the fence that believes that they really needed to sign someone in this window, for me it's always been a lot more about either you need to sign a U22 for the next generation, or it wouldn't be a bad idea to pick up somebody for depth. I think if you're of the position that they didn't really need to sign anyone because the team they have right now is probably good enough, I mean, yeah, I think that's a reasonable position, and I think this game definitely bolstered that view.
Yeah, you know, to just back up one of your observations, the Sounders have played 37 games across all competitions this year. They've used 36 different lineups, which is pretty remarkable. Like, that's even by this, like the Sounders, I feel like have always used a lot of different combinations in their lineups just because that's, and I guess a lot of teams do, but this seems extreme. They're basically playing on an average of 4.5 days rest all season. They are making more than 3.5 changes per game, every game. This is a team that has been using a lot of their roster and just being remarkably effective. They right now have already scored more. They've already tied their all competition record for home goals scored in a season. I believe they are only 2 goals away from tying their the most goals they've scored at home in an MLS campaign. They've got 4 games left to tie that record. It's been really a remarkable season in terms of depth. They have another way of illustrating that. I think they have 9 players that have at least 2 goals, which last year they had 4 players that had, or 4 or 5, I guess maybe 5 players that had at least 2 goals. It's just been really an impressive display of using everyone on the roster and not just using them, but actually getting production out of them.
Yeah, I think that the way the team has played has created opportunities for everyone. I think the Sounders had a lot of players last year who were capable of scoring goals if, the stars were aligned the right way and the moon was in the 7th house and whatever else. And I think this year they're just creating so many quality chances that guys are going to get a lot of cracks at putting them away. They're generating these chances like the one on the first goal that they scored against Sporting Kansas City, where they had 4 very good cracks at goal before before the shot went in. Moose has scored a ton of just completely wide open opportunities this year. They've created all kinds of chances. Weirdly, the only area in chance creation they haven't been super dangerous at has been set pieces, which was the only way they could score for long swaths of last season.
Yeah, that is kind of funny the way that's worked out.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, but they're just so holistically good at creating consistent danger in a way that I don't think any Sounders team that I can remember has ever been, including the 2014 team. We've talked about this before, but that was such a 2-man show. And games where you were missing one of those 2 guys or you were missing Ozzy, you didn't feel confident going into them. I felt very confident going into this game against Sporting Kansas City, even knowing that the lineup was heavily rotated, because I've seen the Sounders play their game consistently, no matter who was on the field all season long. And that means their game means creating chances, keeping a lot of pressure on the opposition. One of the things we talked about earlier in the season was how they created all of these great opportunities to score off of counters due to their really effective high pressure, and they weren't able to convert that into actual scoring opportunities. And they have gotten extremely good at doing that.
Yep.
And there were a lot of things that I liked about the way last year's Sounders team played. And I liked it so much that I was willing to put up with the stuff that they did that drove most people crazy. And I think reasonably so. And they've kept a lot of that identity and added this cutting edge to it that is just sort of like my platonic ideal of how I want my MLS team to play. And it's this team has been, over the course of its history, kind of a team of personalities, right? Like they were Freddie Montero's team and they sort of took on his personality. They were Clinton Oba's team and they sort of took on that personality. They were Ladero's team for longer than anybody else's. And last year they were kind of struggling to figure out who they were. And this is the first time I can really say that they have a personality and a style of play that is team-wide, that seems to take advantage of everybody's strengths and minimize everybody's weaknesses. And it's a lot of fun to watch in it. I think that their ceiling is really, really high. I wish they could have found a way to make it a little higher in the transfer window, but
yeah,
I also understand not wanting to upset that balance when you feel like you have a pretty good thing going.
Yeah, it's a convenient position, I think, for Craig Weibel to take, where he says, well, we didn't sign anyone, but that was partly because we had to be really careful about not messing with sort of what we have here. But there's also like some validity and truth to that position. And it's kind of what's frustrating, I think, about this transfer window. And I guess maybe this is a good transition into it, is that I do think there is truth in a lot of, like, I don't think Craig Weibel was being untruthful to us. I don't think he was fudging, but there just felt like a lot of convenient truths as well. The idea that they were sort of looking for this perfect player, this player who was a U22 who's going to contribute right away, who also, fit within their budget, also didn't make so much money that they were, they obviously, to be a U22, you had to make basically $750,000 or less in salary. And you go, well, those players don't really exist. And I think you can make a very valid case that that's a good reason to just, like, the U22 to me is about stockpiling talent. It's not about addressing immediate needs. And the Sounders made a choice to try to address immediate needs instead of stockpiling talent. And that sort of gives them an out to not make the signing. Now, I suppose if they go out and they make that signing in the winter, on some level, you kind of forgive it. But it did feel like there was, so it's like, I guess in that same tone, it feels a little insincere to say, like, well, they could have done something to help this year's team. And it's like, yeah, that was admittedly that they were trying to thread a really tight needle there. And I'm both frustrated and disappointed that they weren't able to do it. But also there is part of me that gets why they didn't do it. Like, that it was very difficult. And so I guess my point is that if you're going to be frustrated, you have to either be frustrated that they didn't address an immediate need, or you have to be frustrated that they didn't stockpile some talent. It's hard to be frustrated about both of those things, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think that this is not a criticism. It's actually a compliment to Craig Weibel. He is a very smart guy who is very good at framing the situation in a way that it makes him look favorable. And I think that's an important skill to have when you're in a role like his. But I do think that by the criteria that he laid out, yeah, it probably did make sense for the Sounders not to sign anyone in this window. But the criteria that he laid out for what would have made a successful signing,
right,
is not the definition of what would have made a successful signing. And you look at the list of players that they supposedly targeted that he basically confirmed, I think, during the press conference.
Yeah.
And those are players I'm happy that they're going after. Like, I think that those would be good signings to make. But that doesn't mean that there's not a tier of player below that who maybe has as high of a ceiling that you really like their profile, you really like their athleticism, but they're not ready to, they're not evidentially better than Darrow yet, right?
Right.
Well, you can still sign that player and they can compete with Darrow and they can give you some depth, because right now, if something happens to him, you're starting Jesus Ferreira in either the third place game or the title game of the Leagues Cup, right? If something happens to him down the stretch, you've got one striker until hopefully the playoffs, right? You don't have that depth. So, yeah, I mean, if that's the criteria he was given from ownership, right, is here's your budget. This is the kind of player I want you to sign. And if you sign a player that doesn't contribute right away, that isn't clearly better than Darrow right now, I'm going to be mad at you. Maybe that's the conversation. Right. I don't know. That's go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I think there's a balance between, because I think you're right. I think that is sort of like, maybe not verbatim what the conversation is, but I do get the impression that Weibel was sort of given the directive, like, here, I'm willing to pay for a U22 transfer, but that's your shot. Like, that's like, we don't get a do-over. And I think there's there's a balance, I think, between that, where you're holding it to such a high standard that you're effectively creating a paradigm where you just don't sign players because there's always a future player that you would maybe rather have, or you get dead set on certain players, and so you don't make the signing. And then there's the other extreme, like what Atlanta went through for a long time, where there was almost no opportunity cost. Like, it was just like, well, just sign a guy if you like them, and if they don't work out, we'll buy them out, and then we'll move on to the next one. And then that sort of leads to this kind of cycle of just sort of wasting money. And there's a middle ground there, right? There's a middle ground where, like, you're allowed to make mistakes. but
Yeah.
not so, but there is still a risk of failure, and
Right.
and I think that that's sort of what I would hope the Sounders are at. And one of the things that I'm trying to sort of balance internally is my frustration with not getting a player signed this window, but also understanding that my frustration is not so much that they didn't sign someone this window.
Yeah.
But what sort of brings it is frustrating is that this was the first summer window in 4 years where they actually had a transfer budget, best I can tell. And they haven't gone out, but it's not just the summer transfer window. It's the last 4 years. They've only paid transfer fees twice in the last 4 years since COVID started. For Leo Chu, I guess 5 years, and Pedro de la Vega. So that's, call it $10 million roughly that they've spent in that time on transfer fees. They are lagging behind every team in MLS. They are dead last in MLS in transfer spending in that time by at least $2 million. That's not an impossible. Clearly, it's not an impossible gap to overcome because they have managed to stay competitive during that time, but it's concerning. And I think it's more about the message that you're sending to sort of the fan base, and you can sort of see this in other parts of the organization where it just feels like, maybe this year it feels like they've started to correct some of this stuff, but in the last few years, you could just see corners being cut in various areas, and the transfer spending is just illustrative of that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that my thing that I keep coming back to, right, is that Greg Weibel can point at the state of things, and Adrian Hanauer as well, and say, this team is clearly one of the best teams in the Western Conference, and arguably one of the best teams in MLS, top contender for MLS Cup. We're in a tournament semifinal. We played in the Champions League this year. Yeah, we lost, but we lost to the eventual champions, who we then demolished in the Leagues Cup. All of our signings, aside from Paul Arriola, who got hurt and can't really, blame anybody for that, but Jesus Ferreira, I think, has come good. Pedro has turned things around and come good. We're doing fine, and this approach works. It's clear that it works. The thing I keep coming back to, though, is that Christian is 30. Jordan is 30 and has missed pretty much the entire year with injuries. Albert Rusnak is
30.
30. Danny Musovski is 29, right? This team is not getting younger. And this core of this team, Stefan Fry is 38,
Rusnak is actually 31, and Fry is 39, actually.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this chart hasn't been updated in a couple months. In any case, you can see the point I'm making, right? Yamar is 32. And a lot of these guys, Stefan Fry, Jordan, Christian, who have been the core of this team for a long time, with obviously with different superstars, but have really been the heart and soul of the team. The Sounders got for free. Christian was a draft pick. Jordan was a homegrown. Steph cost, I think, like a second round draft pick,
I believe.
Third round draft.
Or maybe
pick.
second.
They don't even
maybe
have that round anymore.
Right.
Rusnak was a free agent. Right. They had to pay him a big TP contract, but they didn't have to pay a transfer fee to get him. Yamar is the only one of those guys they paid a transfer fee for, and it wasn't a huge transfer fee. And that way of building your squad, you can't take it for granted. Like you're probably not going to get another Christian.
Right.
There's no Jordan, right? That's one of the reasons you sign a U22, who, even if they can't contribute right away, maybe they'll be able to contribute in a year, 6 months, whatever. If you sign them now and get them acclimated and used to the team and used to the area and living in a different country and all that stuff, maybe they can contribute right away starting next season. But you've got to start succession planning. Right. And it doesn't feel like they're doing that at all. I mean, they have this great academy, and I think that they don't get enough credit for how good their academy is. I think Seider Brunel is going to be a star. Obed is probably going to be their first major transfer sale since DeAndre Yedlin. They're producing good players, but
which is crazy to think.
It is pretty
crazy to think about that.
It is. But they're producing good players. It's fantastic, but they're not producing another Jordan Morris. Osaze is a great player, but he's 24, and he wasn't an academy product. I think he's developed a lot since he got into the organization, obviously, but he's not a homegrown prospect. And they've never really produced a striker other than Jordan, who, whether or not the club really produced him in the traditional sense, is kind of up for debate as well.
Right.
So it's just, I worry about what's going to happen when this core ages out. I really do. And I think this is the point at which you really have to be thinking very hard, especially because, Christian might be a highly effective starter for another 3-4 years, but I think Obed's probably gone next year. I think Craig even alluded to that. I think that there's a good chance.
Right. They need to start. They start to, like, he basically said they need to start selling players in order to generate the kind of allocation, because it's basically what he was saying is it's not so much about spending transfer fees. It's about raising how much money you have under the cap, because there's a lot more players that are affected by that. And in order to create more money under the cap, you just absolutely have to sell players. There's just no way around it. You cannot keep up with the best teams in the league by selling draft picks and selling international roster spots. You've got to figure out how to get, $1.5 million GAM the way that they got from the Josh Atencio trade. They have to keep doing that type of stuff. And the only way you're going to do that is by doing sales. And that is, so these are all sort of problems. And you're right. Like the one of the ways, like, and that's sort of where the U22 stuff kind of comes back around, is that, like, theoretically selling U22s is a potentially good way of generating some of that allocation money.
Yeah, it's the perverse incentives of I hate to say this, but modern football, right? And the mechanisms are different in MLS, but it's the same stuff that clubs in the Premier League have to deal with, where you're incentivized to sell homegrown players so you can buy players who were not homegrown from abroad, who are worse, who will probably never play for you, so that you can sell them in a year or two, so that you can buy some more play. It sucks in a lot of ways, but that's the global transfer system. And for MLS to continue to improve, you've got to get comfortable swimming in those waters. And part of that is, buying a lottery ticket every now and then and hoping that you can turn it into a meaningful transfer.
Save big during Labor Day at Lowe's. Get up to 40% off select major appliances. Plus, buy more to get up to an additional 20% off. Shop even more savings with 3 Stay Green 1 cubic foot vegetable and flower garden soil bags for $10. This Labor Day, take care of your home for less at Lowe's. We help, you save. Valid through 9/3. Soil offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location. Select locations only. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
For in a few years.
Yeah, I think and that's really what we're saying here is it's not so much that I don't think we're not saying that Craig Weibel is incompetent, but I think
he's extremely competent.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's clear. In some ways that's, it is sort of like they created a more complicated situation by being so effective at creating the roster that they have. Like, if you don't have a Osaze de Rosario ready to just call up whenever you want, it makes it easier to go out and identify a U22 who you feel like that can help you. Similarly, if you don't have a Snyder Brunell just waiting there to be signed to the first team, it's easier to find players that you feel like can improve your midfield. And, the reality is that between Snyder Brunell and Osaze de Rosario, these guys have 5 goals in like 800 minutes between them across all competitions, something along those lines. And there's like really no way that they were going to get that kind of production that quickly out of a U22 signing. And don't get me wrong, you could do both things. You can sign Osasa De Rosario, you can sign Snyder Burnell, and you can still go out and sign a U22. But if your standard is these guys need to play right away, that's going to be tough. And so I think that's more my issue is like, I think creating this idea that they had to, the player they signed had to be able to contribute essentially right away just felt to me like a little bit more like an excuse not to sign somebody.
And if those are your criteria, right? If you are insistent on that we're not going to use these, we're not going to pay a transfer fee or use these spots on players that can't contribute right now to the first team, fine, but use them on the players you have now and make that, because clearly the way they have built their roster, they've built it in a way that they have left space to go sign a U22 externally, right?
Right.
Because if they weren't going to do that, they would have signed Obed and Reed and maybe Brunel, although there's not really an incentive to sign him to a U22 right now, I guess. But they would be using at least 2 of those spots, right?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really make sense. Like, why they haven't just given Obed Vargas a max U22 contract like today seems a little like, what are we doing here?
It's pretty strange because he's fully out of contract, right? He doesn't have an option next year.
He's got an option. Obed has an option. Reed is out of contract though. Reed, I don't think you need to, like, I would imagine the cost of signing Reed is lower than Obed, but I do think that they could help themselves a little bit by making some signings like internally, like get Paul Rothrock extended, get Reed Baker Whiting extended, get Obed Vargas extended. The good news is that Danny Musovski has got a team option for next year. I would imagine the Sounders don't feel a lot of pressure to renegotiate that. It is kind of funny. He got a pretty big raise this year, which I guess was in his contract. I think he got like $150,000 raise this year. And I'm sure there was a lot of people that were frustrated by that, but boy, does that look like, can you imagine where this team would be if they didn't have Danny Musovski just sort of waiting there?
I think they would have had to have done something drastic. I think I think they probably would have had to have maybe sold Pedro and eaten that some of that transfer fee like that. Or it's been interesting. And I think what they do with Moose is, it's entirely possible. I think maybe even better than 50-50 odds that he is going to set the single season goal scored record for the team. He's at 15 goals.
He's at 15 goals for all comps. The record is 19. Yeah. And they probably have at least 10 games left. Yeah, they have literally, assuming they have at least 10 games left to play. So if he continues to score at the clip that he doesn't have necessarily 10 games. He has 8, I guess, because he can't play in 2 of them. But he's going to have opportunities. It's just very, very funny to think that Danny Musovski could end up being the first 20 goal scorer in Sounders history.
If he scores at his current XG in MLS play, he would score 19 goals, which would tie the all competitions record. Yes. No, it would break it because he would have 21 all comp, 19 in MLS.
Or you're saying he would have 19 in MLS?
He would have, because he would basically through those last 8 games at his XG pace in MLS, he would score 6 because he's scoring something like 0.84 per 90 in MLS. Now, I don't think it's reasonable to expect him to keep up that pace. But I think he could score 4 and at least tie the record,
the thing that's amazing, he just gets into so many dangerous spots. He doesn't even have to be clinical, early in this game against Sporting Kansas City, effectively the first play of the game, Georgie Manungu rips a cross through the box that if Musovski just gets a foot on it, it's a goal. He's a little slow. I think you could say he's a little slow there. And then like 5 minutes later, he picks off a ball in the box. He rounds the goalkeeper and he hits the side netting. And then he gets 2 goals that are one-touch finishes off of headers. And then he gets a penalty, which I don't know. There was some debate. Where did you come down on that? Is it more important to get Danny Leyva his first MLS goal, or is it more important for Danny Musovski to complete his first MLS hat trick?
I mean, it would have been nice to see Danny get his first MLS goal. If Danny had done something really special to win the penalty, I would have
as opposed to just getting sort of knocked over.
Yeah. And like, also, I mean, Moose is a veteran player, although he hasn't been in MLS that much longer than Danny, I guess. But he's put the team on his back and he was on a hat trick, and he's like, I think the older veteran, higher profile player is going to get the penalty 100 times out of 100 in that case, but especially when they're on a hat trick. But but I can't imagine. I'm sure Danny was disappointed. I feel bad for him, but
yeah, I mean,
I'm not going to lose a lot of sleep over it.
No, and Danny's going to get his goal at some point, although I would think the thing that bugs him more is that Snyder Brunell has played 2 games and now has 2 goals, which
that's got to sting a little bit.
Yeah. I got to say though, I've been watching these goals that Snyder Brunell scored, and both of them are not necessarily well taken goals, but the movement on them is so good. Like, especially this goal against Sporting Kansas City. So he's making this run and he's sort of like motioning to Manungu to play him in. And then he just pulls his run back and he's just sitting there waiting for a cutback, and he finishes it with his left foot. Both of his goals actually are with his left foot, which I think is kind of an interesting little thing because he's not left-footed. But I was really, really impressed by Snyder Brunell during this whole game. He completed 40 of 42 passes, something like that. He was really strong on the ball. Just a very impressive game. I've watched more Snyder Brunell than I would imagine most people have. And honestly, he looks like a player who is better equipped to play in MLS than in MLS Next Pro, which is kind of weird. But Kalani Kosa Rienzi, I was actually talking about this with Tim Foss in the press box. Both of those players seem like their game is almost better suited for MLS because they're surrounded by players who can kind of spot what they're doing. And they're just, they're just so, they've both been very good. But I am kind of fell in love with Snyder Brunell a little bit against Sporting Kansas City. That was a very impressive performance.
He looked great. And the thing that I'll say about his goals especially is that I love Obed Vargas. I think that by the time his career is done, there's a very good chance that he will be the best player to have ever worn a Sounders kit. But he could learn something by watching Snyder Brunell's late runs and the way he gets into the box. And I would like to see Obed add that to his game. And I know adding goals has been a focus for him, but Snyder just gets into those really good positions. And if Obed can add that to his game, I think that the sky's the limit for him. So Obed's better at everything else. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But that one aspect I've been really impressed with.
One of the great underrated skills of soccer players in general, and I think this is true about Danny Musovski, it's true about Osaze de Rosario, and it looks like it might be true about Snyder Brunell, is getting yourself into spots where you have a relatively easy finish is such an underrated skill. Like there are even Jordan Morris, as good as he is, the number of goals that he scores that look easy, not that high. Danny Musovski feels like this guy has 15 goals and they're like good headers and he had 2 good headers. Neither one of those were necessarily easy finishes, but he puts himself in such a advantageous position over and over and over again. And to the point where he can miss chances. And it's not like he's, with Jordan, like he does a good job of running in behind and getting breakaways and he finishes, at a decent clip on those. But man, I just am constantly amazed at how easy Danny Musovski makes some of this look. It's very, very impressive.
It's extremely Wondolowski-esque, I think. Like I think Wondolowski was a better athlete than Danny, although Danny's a very good athlete as well. But I mean, Wondolowski was, I think, an elite MLS level athlete. But he just knows where to be. He knows where to go from where he is right now. He knows, like, he has a really good understanding with his teammates. I think that's the biggest difference between 2025 Danny Musovski and 2024 Danny Musovski is the timing was just a little bit off. So the shot that Osaze missed where he skied it over the bar, where the ball was just a little bit behind him and it turned what looked like a sitter into actually like a much more difficult finish.
Right.
Danny had that situation constantly last season. And he missed all these chances that looked a lot easier than they were because the timing on the runs was just a little bit off. The understanding with his teammates was just a little bit off. And I think this season he's just completely locked in with everybody else on the timing of his runs. And so he's just making things that much easier on himself. And, he's not like some sort of Messi-esque or Evander-esque, I guess, finisher in terms of like, outperforming his XG.
No, he's actually like right on par with his XG.
It's pretty remarkable. But he is 6th in the league in shots per 90. And if you get that many shots,
wow, I didn't know that he was that good.
Yeah, he's right behind Benteke.
Wow. Okay.
And if you finish at an expected rate and you get that many shots, you're gonna score a bunch of goals. And yeah, it's crazy, and I do think it legitimately causes a little bit of a, not crisis, but it gives you a choice to make for next year, right? Like,
it's a very interesting choice.
Yeah, I don't see any way, if Jordan is back in time for the playoffs and he's healthy and he's ready to play, it's really nice to have an option off the bench, right? Like you cannot take Danny out of the lineup if he's performing at this level.
It's crazy to say, but I tend to agree. I tend to agree.
But going into next year, I mean, I think if you're a team that is, you feel like you're on the cusp of being a contender, and you don't have a 9, you just want a sure thing at 9. You've got the supporting cast in place, and the Sounders say, "Hey, are you interested in Danny Musovski?" You could probably get a pretty decent return, And he's not somebody I feel like the Sounders really should be signing long term. He's going into his age 30 season, and he's never done anything like this, right? Like, who knows if it's ever going to happen again? So, it'll be interesting to see.
It will definitely be interesting. It'll definitely
good problem
be
to have.
Very much. Well, the Sounders also have a game coming up tomorrow or today, I guess, probably by the time you listen to this, they're playing the LA Galaxy in essentially a CONCACAF Champions Cup play-in game. If the winner of this game gets a guaranteed spot, as well as the potential to host the final. Like, that's the other thing that's on the line. The winner of this game will host the final against the winner of Orlando, Miami. We have an interview coming up with Mo Edu where we will sort of get into depth a little bit more. But is there anything, broadly speaking, any narratives about this game that you feel like need to be sort of addressed?
No, I mean, the Galaxy are a weird team,
to say the least.
They're not good. They're definitely not as bad as their record looks. I like Osaze de Rosario. I really wish Danny Musovski was healthy. But Deros has scored and performed as well. So,
but the theme of this season seems to be like, why make it easy on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
absolutely.
Why? Who cares?
But I do think,
just raise the level of difficulty at every turn.
Yeah. And I think that the Sounders having pretty much everyone else and being able to put out whatever kind of lineup they feel like they want to put out is, kind of quite a luxury. So I expect them to win this game. I wouldn't be shocked if they don't, just because the Galaxy are capable of playing really well at times. And, I wouldn't be shocked if they picked this one to do it. But this is, to me, we talked about this before the tournament. This is the game that determines whether or not this tournament was a success that was worth doing or a huge waste of time. Because I guess if they lose and they finish third, it's still was worth it.
It's still the third best outcome.
It is. Yeah. I was convinced until like the 85th minute of the last game that this was the game that determined whether or not they would get to the Champions League. And once I realized it wasn't, it became a lot less stressful. But I would really like to get to Champions League again, because I think that they're going to have a very good team again next year. And, it's always fun to play in that tournament. So,
right.
Yeah, but I don't have any great insight on this game. LA is weird. So are the Sounders. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah, I think, the one thing I come back to is trying to figure out if the win that they had over the Galaxy a few weeks ago or a couple weeks ago, who that helps. Like, is that, do the Sounders have the advantage, or does, like, I don't know. And maybe it doesn't matter. But one thing I do think about that is, I don't know what I think about that. I don't know what I think the result. I don't know if that result meant anything. It's just so. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. One thing that we know is that the Sounders at least are convinced that there's not a lot we can take away from it, because the Galaxy were on short rest. They're gonna have, their starters are now fully rested. There's a different mentality, I think, for them. I don't know. The Galaxy, like you said, are very weird.
Yeah, they definitely are. The Sounders were somewhat, well, not really. No, they had Andy Thomas played, obviously, and Kim started at center back. They were pretty much full strength otherwise. So
yeah, the Sounders weren't totally full strength.
Oh, they're missing Rusnak too. Yeah, they're missing Rusnak.
Right. But they're like, the Sounders aren't more full. I guess they're maybe slightly more full strength in this game, but they're missing Wasowski.
Yeah, they're missing Wasowski and Rusnak, and those are both pretty big misses, I think.
Right. Oh, do they have? No, they didn't have. That was the game that.
Yeah, it was the first game without Albert. Yeah.
Right. But all right. Well, that's a good place. We'll call this a segment. Listen, stick around for the Mo Edu interview. I'll come back and give some closing thoughts. You're listening to Nos Arietes.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Arietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
Nos Arietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at hacksandferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to hacksandferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. Welcome back to Nos Audietes. So we are getting ready for a really big Leagues Cup semifinal right now. Helping me preview this game is Mo Edu. You know him well from his playing days, but also he is a color announcer for a color broadcaster for Apple TV. He's going to be doing tomorrow's game or Wednesday's game with Keith Costigan. Welcome to the show, Mo.
Hey, how you doing, man? Appreciate you for having me.
Yeah, so this is a fun one. The Sounders and LA Galaxy have a pretty rich history of meeting. It's kind of a nice kind of, I guess, dovetailing that this was also the Western Conference final last year, and it's sort of a replay of that. But the teams are in very different positions than they were last year, obviously.
Yeah, it's listen, there's a really healthy rivalry between these two teams, and they both have a winning pedigree attached to them. As you mentioned, they're in different positions right now, currently in the MLS table. Seattle, the much better of the two sides in terms of consistency and the way that this season has played out. But Galaxy are the reigning MLS Cup champion. So coming into this game, you would say there's a lot at stake for both sides, but even more so from the Galaxy standpoint because of how poorly they're doing in the regular season. But make no mistake about it, both teams will be viewing this as an opportunity to, first and foremost, qualify for a CCC spot, but then also to get one step closer to lifting a trophy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little surreal to think that the Galaxy are coming into this game as probably the worst ever defending MLS Cup champions, and yet they are one win away from qualifying for Champions Cup next year.
That's the beauty of this sport, right? That no matter how down you feel like you are at times, that as long as you approach things with the right mentality and the right way, and that's what the Galaxy have done with Leagues Cup. They've used that as their springboard to potentially, I don't want to say save the season, but to be able to attach some kind of positivity to it. If they're able to get a CCC spot, that by all accounts is an incredible accomplishment. But then if they're able to actually lift the trophy as well, you know, when it's all said and done, they'll be doing something that majority of the teams that make the playoff, I mean, every team minus one, if we're being just specific about it, they'll be doing something that every team minus one won't have done, right? So it's a weird kind of juxtaposition that you view this through. But that being said, look, it's not gonna completely erase what this season has been like in the minds of their fan base, but it's gonna give them something incredible to celebrate if they're able to lift the trophy. And for Seattle, it's about continuing the momentum that they've had throughout the course of this season. I would say the stretch following Club World Cup has seen this team in incredible form. They came to LA earlier this month and, you know, put a hurting on the Galaxy 4-0. So in some ways, they'll be recognizing, both teams will recognize that result. And from a Galaxy standpoint, they'll want to avenge that. From a Seattle standpoint, they'll realize and know that their expectation coming into that game should be a completely different one and a response from the Galaxy side. So there's a lot to play for, and I can't wait. These are two managers that I have an incredible amount of respect for. The longevity that they've had in this league, the success that's accompanied that longevity is incredible. Brian Spencer for Seattle and Greg Vanney for Galaxy, as well as with Toronto FC. And two clubs that have always shown a level of ambition to compete, to try to acquire players in different ways, and to just always be a name that's mentioned when you talk about the hierarchy of Major League Soccer.
Yeah, so you mentioned the previous meeting that was just a couple weeks ago, or I guess a few weeks ago at this point. No, a couple weeks ago. But how much is there anything that we should take away from that meeting? I know the Galaxy used effectively a first choice group, but they were on short rest. They will be much better rested this time. Most of their starters did not play when they actually beat the Rapids this last weekend. Whereas the Sounders will be a little bit different, the Sounders will also have a little bit of a different team. What do you take away from that game, and should we take anything away from it?
I mean, you definitely take something away from it because Seattle came on the road and got a result, right? They got a result in an emphatic way. So you can't ever mask that or take away from that result and that performance. And both teams will probably feel in that way. But that being said, both teams will also view this as this is a different competition. right? That result only had bearing on the league position and your league standing and how you're trying to make a playoff position. This is now a one-off event, right? There's no, hey, we have a game next week guaranteed. Well, I guess they have a third place game if they don't win, but there's no, in the league season, you know that you have consistent games where you can make up points or make amends for a result. For both teams now, if you're trying to win League Cup and lift the trophy, it's win or go home, right? And that's the mindset, that's the mentality that you'll be approaching this game from. You'll take whatever lessons you can take from a tactical standpoint or approach standpoint from that last game. But even with that being said, I still view this as kind of a one-off situation where you're going to look at the history that you have against this team and things that have worked in years past and in games past. But knowing that you got to just approach this game from the standpoint of this is a cup final in essence, right? This is the ticket for you to get into CCC, and then get you one step closer to lifting a trophy. And again, both of these managers have been in this position before. They know what it takes to get over the line. They know what it takes to get to the finish line, and then they know what it takes to cross that finish line. So I'm incredibly intrigued and excited to see the intensity that this game brings, the little tactical nuances that the game starts with that have to be adapted as the game progresses and how the game finishes.
So you look at this roster that the Galaxy are likely to be putting out, and it frankly doesn't really make sense how it has done so poorly in league play. But what have they done so much better in Leagues Cup that they weren't able to translate into league play?
I would say leading up to Leagues Cup, they finally were able to stay healthy, first and foremost. Guys like Marco Royce and your bigger players, your Marco Royces, your Gabriel Peck, your Joseph Paintstills, they all had their own little share of niggles that either allowed them not to play or slowed them down. And there was also a little bit of an adaptation. There was quite a while where they had to really find a way to adapt to the loss of Ricky Pooch. And part of that, kind of Kurt tells me what I was saying about the injury. Marco Royce was supposed to be the one who stepped in to really supplement and take that responsibility that was left with Ricky Pooch being out injured. So it took them a while to kind of find their feet and get into form. But then they went on a little stretch where they started picking up some points and just starting to look like the team with the potential that we all thought they had. And it kind of played its way into League Cup, where you could tell from day one the approach was, this is our opportunity. This is our opportunity to, in an isolated tournament, to make a run, to build some momentum, and to earn an opportunity to still be celebrated in the way that we should be, based off the fact that we're the reigning MLS Cup champions.
So which of the players for the Galaxy are you most sort of looking to step up in this game that would give them a real chance against the Sounders?
Well, of course, it's the bigger players that naturally you look at, your Joseph Paintstills, your Marco Royce, your Gabriel Peck. But outside of them, I'm looking at both fullbacks. I'm actually looking at the whole back line, because I think the back line will be valuable on both sides of the ball. The fullbacks and their ability to defend in 1v1 situations, as well as to get forward and provide service. The center backs, can they put together another performance like they did against Pachuca, where they defended their 18-yard box really well, defended crosses well, minimized threats in the 18 for large spells of that game. And then if I were to pinpoint one other player, it's Diego Fagundes. I've been really impressed with what he's brought to that midfield. His experience at still such a young age is really showing, and he's kind of been that link that really helped to give comfort to the young Edwin Cerrillo and allow Marco Royce to have more freedom to really just find the spot in the attacking phase of the game where he can cause the most problems. So I've been really impressed with Diego Fagundes. He's a guy that you want on your team all the time, comfortable in possession of the ball, works his tail off defensively. And I think for so long, I've viewed him as more of an attacking player, right? Playing either as an attacking mid or on the wing and doing most of his contributions in the final third. But the way that he went about his game, especially in that last game against Pachuca, it really, really impressed me. Just incredibly solid on both sides of the ball, a leader, barking out orders, organizing those players around him. And I thought he was a big reason to why they had success.
And then I guess on the other side, what has impressed you about what the Sounders have done since the Club World Cup?
Going into the Club World Cup, everyone kind of looked at the Sounders and thought, good luck to you. You're in the group of death. And being fair to them and their performances, I thought they maybe deserved a little bit more, because they competed like bastards in those games. I thought they showed, although the results didn't go their way, I thought they gave an incredibly good account for themselves, especially in that group. And those kind of moments give you confidence, right? You go and play against the best of the best, and you show well for yourself. Like, you walk away from that, of course, you're pissed off, you're disappointed that you didn't win the game or get the result. But when you have a chance to watch that back and analyze things and see where you fared in relation to these opponents in 1v1 duels or just like your individual matchups and then your collective matchups, this is a team that can look at that and say there's a lot of things that they can be proud about from those games. And I think they've used that to just build on that, to generate some momentum going forward. I feel like this roster this year has been in a different way, a deeper roster. There's been more competition for spots. Brian Spencer and his group, they've dealt with quite a few injuries as well, but you almost sometimes forget that because you always adopt the next man up mentality. It doesn't always play out that way, but this group seems to really have adopted that mentality. You know, different guys stepping up in different moments. It's unfortunate that, you know, that Musovski's going to miss out on this game with the red card, but, you know, the form that he's come into, Di Rosario chipped in with a couple goals during this campaign as well. I've been impressed with the tandem of Obed Vargas and Roldan in midfield. I think these two over the course of the season have been incredibly solid, found a really good partnership, and do a good job of balancing off of one another. So there's a lot of pieces that Brian Spencer has at his disposal over the course of the season that have chipped in at various stages. I think that I just saw a stat yesterday. What was it? I think Seattle scored 11 goals in League Cup, and it's like 8 different goal scorers.
Yeah.
Right. So that just kind of speaks to the way that different guys share the responsibility of contributing in different moments.
So just on a little bit of a different note, today the U.S. national team roster for the September games came out. Neither Christian Roldan nor Jackson Reagan were on that. I was kind of hopeful. I thought they both had pretty good shouts. What do you make of their exclusion and more generally, what do you make of the roster?
I don't have the roster in front of me, to be honest with you, but
that's okay. They're not on it.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's, you know, anytime a roster comes out, you're always gonna feel like there were a couple snubs or that there were guys who have done enough to at least be in that conversation. And you know, all I can say to these two players is just to keep going, right? Like their work, their performances, they don't go unnoticed, but sometimes, you know, managers looking to see this player and give this player an opportunity or that player an opportunity, but all you can do as a player, I've been a player myself, is just put your head down, keep going to work. And as you continue to have success with your club team and your team has success, of course, it's a bigger and bigger spotlight on your performance as well. And these guys know that, you know, Christian knows that, Jackson, they both know that. And whether there's disappointment on their end or not, it's not going to deter them from what they need to do, which is to continue to be standout players and reliable players for the Sounders and try to steer their team in the right direction into more success.
Well, that's probably a good place to end this, Mo. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'll let you get back to that wonderful heat in Las Vegas, and hopefully you'll get to see a good game out there at Dignity Health Sports Park.
That's the plan, my man. That's the plan. It should be an incredible match, and looking forward to it.
All right, sounds good. Welcome back. Thank you to Mo Edu for doing that interview. Thank you to our sponsors, Full Pull Wines, Hacks and Ferments. And of course, thank you to all our subscribers. We have really knocked it out of the park in terms of our subscriber drive this year. We are trending ahead of where we were last year, which was trending ahead of where we were in 2023. So that's great. Like, we are in a really great position right now. And so I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for supporting us and doing everything to make sure that this is a sustainable project. It's been a lot of fun. Hopefully people are enjoying it. We'll have, more good stuff coming up in the year ahead. But with all that said, I am Jeremiah Oshan, signing off for Aaron Campo and Lickett. This is Nos Audietes, part of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. And remember, you'll never yacht alone.
job. Let's go Sounders.
Shop the Sherwin-Williams Labor Day sale and get 35% off paints and stains August 22nd through September 4th. With prices starting at $31.84, it's the perfect time to transform your space with color. Whether you're looking to revamp your interior or exterior, we have you covered with bold hues, soothing neutrals, and everything in between. Visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store or shop the sale online. Delivery available on qualifying orders. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.